James Lindsay, 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 James Lindsay is. Why won't James Lindsay use the term capitalism?
Capitalism doesn't mean what you think it is. We have a gigantic file box basically out there now where the theme is communists share your vocabulary, but they don't share your dictionary. In other words, they mean something different by the words they use so that when you hear them, you think they mean what you think those words mean, but they mean something that they think those words mean. They think that capitalism is a totalizing ideology, a fundamental organizing principle of all of society. Marx laid out this straw man not only when he wrote Capital in the 1860s and then to the end of his life, but also when he wrote his earlier writings even back into the 1840s, including the Communist Manifesto. They don't think of capitalism the way that you think of capitalism. To make a quick summary, they think of capitalism as there's this special kind of private property.
Why won't James Lindsay use the term capitalism?
So these fellas come up with this stuff, and then Herbert Marcuse takes over directorship of the Frankfurt School, and in 1955 he writes Eros and Civilization. This is about putting Freud into Marx. You can read it yourself. He's constantly talking about how the capitalist society takes the libido and suppresses it and forces you to sublimate it into productive work. So all of the fun that you want to have, all of the interests that you have, all the sex you want to have, all of that gets bottled up and turned into productive work instead. And so we could just get rid of the capitalist engine and we could free up that libido and live liberated lives. So the whole sexual liberation movement has some pretty profound roots connected to Eros and Civilization.
Why won't James Lindsay use the term capitalism? The only people who care about Western values, Western civilization, are conservatives because they refuse to acknowledge that this is not about race. And Western is their way of saying white people. And James Lindsay knows this because James Lindsay knows about the paper Whiteness is Property by Cheryl Harris in 1993. James Lindsay has seen the video of Cheryl Harris making a speech at UCLA Law School in 2014. I know because Tayton tagged him with it on Twitter, where Cheryl Harris, the author of the paper Whiteness is Property, literally says you do not have to have white skin to engage in whiteness. That Black people can engage in whiteness too. Because whiteness is about who controls the power structure, and it is about capitalism, and you cannot fight against whiteness without fighting against capitalism too. That is from Cheryl Harris herself. So don't tell me that James Lindsay doesn't fucking know that, because he does.
In 1993, Cheryl Harris wrote a long article for the Harvard Law Review called Whiteness is Property. She explained that whiteness, or white privilege, constitutes a kind of cultural private property. She says it must be abolished in order to have racial justice. Just like Karl Marx said that in the Communist Manifesto, he wrote, communism can be summarized in a single sentence, the abolition of private property. Well, this is why critical race theory calls to abolish whiteness, because whiteness is a form of private property.
What does James Lindsay mean by that? Oh, does he mean capitalism? He means capitalism. Could he mean capitalism? Maybe he means capitalism. Perhaps it's capitalism. Maybe capitalism. I would say it's probably capitalism. Maybe capitalism. Oh, maybe some private property as well, which is, of course, the left's definition of capitalism. Capitalism and private property. Could that be what he's saying?
Dear Dr. Helen Wilson, I have now closely considered the revisions of your manuscript, Dog Park, and will recommend its publication in Gender, Place, and Culture. You have done very good work to address the issues reviewers raised and have clarified your arguments. Thank you for your contribution to Gender, Place, and Culture, and I hope to be seeing your manuscript in print. Yours truly, PhD, Managing Editor.
You need to know what you are really involved in. Stop participating, deprogram yourself and your friends, and start fighting for the blessings of liberty that allowed you to have the privilege to think in this way in the first place. You can and might lose it. The first generation in American history to face the loss of liberty, and you're enslaving yourselves. So-called liberation movements are lies. Mao called his army, the same one he dispatched to destroy your counterparts in the Red Guard, the People's Liberation Army. For a reason. You need to fight for liberty. Your chains that you think you need liberation from are forged by frauds and locked only in your heads. The oldest recorded cautionary tale in human history, the story of the serpent and Eve in the 3rd chapter of Genesis, warns you about false liberation. Whether you are religious or not, what they call liberation is a destructive lie. But it is true that you are the future, and that your choices matter, and that you need to choose better.